And welcome back to the Marching Arts Network podcast. My name is Kanan. Thank you so much for joining us today. Joining me is, of course, my glamorous co-hosts. I will just go like this because I don't know who's in what direction. So,
we don't either. I'm Jen. Hi.
And I'm the Stress Master. You guys know who I am.
So we have a really exciting show today. I think it's exciting, at least.
Very exciting.
For those who don't know, the Sky Ryders Drum and Bugle Corps are coming back to the field. They're coming back in a measured approach. The first year or two is going to be in SoundSport, and we are lucky enough to have the CEO of the Sky Ryders Alumni Association and the
he was the president of the board of the Alumni Foundation.
That's it. The head honcho of the Sky Ryders.
Yes.
Dale Antoine is joining us today. So we're going to have a nice conversation with Dale and talk drum corps, talk what the Sky Ryders have coming up, what the Sky Ryders had in the past. I'll rib them a lot for the fact that they beat us in a year that I didn't think they should have beat us. And so without further ado, here we go.
All right, we have our guest on. So I want to first, Dale, want to introduce ourselves. I mean, we kind of talked off camera kind of about when we marched. So I'll kind of edit that in so we don't have to rehash that. But my name is Justin, but I go by the Stress Master. That's just kind of my handle. And there's a reason for that because that's what I was called in drum corps. So I kind of stuck with that mantra because I still do that today. But and I'll let Kanan introduce himself.
I'm Kanan. They used to call me Tumor because I marched spot B9 once in a lifetime ago. So, but yeah, that's me.
I'm Jen. I don't have a cool nickname because I'm just Jen.
You're just Jen. That's your nickname, just Jen.
I'm just Jen. Yeah. As we said, I marched in the freelancers with these two guys, and then I went on and finished my marching career with a Phantom Regiment, who I'm still working with today.
Great. So I'm Dale Antoine. I'm the executive director of the Sky Ryders and the president of the board of the foundation, Sky Ryders Performing Arts Foundation. My history, I started in Sky Ryders in 1970 with what we call the Jets, which way back then we had a feeder corps. And then I marched 71 through 78. I was a baritone player and then was on visual staff for a couple of years. And then I left the activity for 4 or 5 years, came back in the fall of 85, and then was the director 86, 87, and 88. Left just before the summer started in 89. And basically since then, I have worked for the last 27 years with DCI as a on-site manager. I'm a head of the event staff for all the shows. So I keep very busy, and then this project came about, and jumped on board with this.
That's amazing.
I feel like we could have a whole separate podcast just talking about event management for DCI.
Oh, most definitely.
But that's for another day.
Yes.
Yeah. So just for those that aren't aware, the Sky Ryders, and please correct me if I got any of this incorrect. I got this all from different sources. So it was founded in 1955, right? I think it was I didn't write this down. That was part of a post, right? Wasn't it part of a post?
It actually drum corps itself. And we just researched this the other day. Started in Hutchinson in 1920s. Okay, now it wasn't known as Sky Ryders, okay, but the same concept. It started out through the American Legion Post and that kind of stuff, and it was kind of off and on. It was, actually ongoing for a couple of years, and it would leave for a couple of years, and it'd come back stuff. But I think you're right. The early 50s, and it might be a little early in 55, but the early 50s, it kind of came back and stuck, and was part of the what they call the Lyle Ritual Post in Hutchinson, all the way up until kind of like when DCI started, and we kind of broke off from the American Legion sponsorship. But,
and there was for those that don't know, there was a circuit prior to DCI called VFW and American Legion and all kinds of different little circuits in the Midwest. before the forming of DCI, and that's kind of what spawned actually DCI to form in 1972. Was that they kind of wanted a more strategic way of evaluating people because there were so many different circuits.
Well, they wanted rules. They wanted rules that made sense.
Yeah, I was using the word strategic, but yeah,
that didn't change the day of the show. So.
Yeah. So I did in my last episode that I uploaded. I went through talking about the G7. I don't know if you remember the G7 controversy a number of years ago, and in that it forced me to go back and look at kind of what forced the formation of DCI. So obviously we had two competing circuits, the VFW, the American Legion, and I believe there was this CYO as well. Was there not as well?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah,
but
there was a number of
the two main were VFW and American Legion.
But at the end of the day, the only ones that were really making out from that were the VFW and the American Legion. The corps themselves weren't really getting much from it as far as financial support or anything like that. And that's kind of where the whole DCI experiment came about. Thankfully, the G7 experiment didn't come about, but that's probably a subject for a different episode, which ironically I've already done.
Another podcast.
So,
because I remember the last major show of one of those was VFW Nationals in Dallas in 1971. Was one of the last major VFW that was well attended and stuff. But I remember you'd have to go there, you'd have to do the VFW parade, which would take hours and hours and hours because it was done by state. And, you sat there forever.
Oh my gosh.
And, but yeah, that was one of the last major shows of the VFW and American Legion era.
would that have been at the Cotton Bowl then?
You know what? I think it was, but that's way too many. I marched in it. It was that's when you used to have to take your show and reduce it to a 6-minute show. And you basically have your opener, you cut out the middle, and then you go to your closer and you be done. And it's just a weird setup.
Yeah.
But those are the golden days of drum corps, according to some.
To some.
Yeah, I'll say it was the late 80s, early 90s, but that's just because I marched those times. But
yeah.
But so I mean, the Sky Ryders, I mean, in what's this is kind of an anecdote, but on one of our podcasts, we were talking about the Sky Ryders, and I was like, oh, I never competed against them, and he's like, well, wait a second, they were in finals with you in '91, and I'm all, oh, they were, because I just didn't remember, my old man syndrome going on, but and I remembered that show that was Camelot. Mm-hmm. Was it Camelot? I think it was Camelot. Great show. I actually watched that show a few times that season, and I just didn't remember until I saw the video again. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that show.
If I remember right, we made finals 5 different times. We made it 86, 87, 88, 91. We also made it, and I wasn't there, but was 82 or 83.
Both years, 82, 83.
82, 83, and then we did 86, 87, 88, and then 91.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
82 is one of my favorite shows ever, by the way. So
yeah, we had some very good horn lines. Of course, we had one of the best horn instructors whoever came through, and John Simpson. And we had some great battles in the Midwest way back then with him and Sandy Opie with Argon and stuff. That was the 70s.
My brothers, they marched 84, 85 freelancers. So I grew up in drum corps, following drum corps around. And as a young child that was bound for color guard, watching Sky Ryders guard and the theatricality of your guard was just so impactful during the 80s, because that guard was doing things that no other guard was doing.
Yeah, they set some standards with the rifle line and stuff. Yeah. We had Tommy Keenum who was in there, and Wes Cartwright and Alan Mugenberg, and just some really phenomenal people who could really perform.
Oh yeah,
and then went on after that
going to shows that you were at.
Yes.
Yeah, I loved watching y'all.
Yeah.
I suppose when you're talking about,
go ahead.
I suppose when you're talking about color guards. Sorry, it's all right. I suppose when you're talking about color guards for Sky Ryders, though, and by the way, I don't know if we mentioned to you, a little treat. We're going to watch the '87 show with you, because we'd love to get your commentary on that, so to speak.
Okay.
But that 87 guard, and I'm a horn guy. And I knew there was a reason I liked you, by the way. I'm a baritone guy myself.
Yeah.
So I don't know anything about guard. I know if I like something or if I don't like something.
That's your
And I
best.
remember I remember back then though seeing that guard. I was 1987. I was a rookie. I was a kid. I didn't know much about the activity, but what I do remember was is that guard really struck out at me. It wasn't so much the different color uniforms, the black, white, and gray. It was that guard and
Yeah.
just the way that they told the visual of the music. It wasn't like this was a guard show written to go along with this show. I don't think that particular show, you could take any one element out of the show and that show would still make sense.
Well, a lot of people feel like the Cadets West Side Story is the best portrayal of it ever. I tend to maybe disagree a little bit. I think 87, what we did was as good or better than what the Cadets. And we didn't score, like they did and stuff. But I think as a betrayal of what the show or what the show was for West Side Story, I think it was as good or better than anything that's ever been put on the field.
I think with
Kanan and
Cadets,
I
it was
did.
more about the music as opposed to with the Sky Ryders version, it was more about bringing that Broadway show to the football field.
Exactly. Yeah.
We actually talked about the Sky Ryders show in a June episode of our podcast last year, getting ready for the new season. And that was our commentary exactly, was where does this sit with the 84 production the Cadets did? And then we talked about how, at least my opinion was that I preferred Sky Ryders' version of it as something that emotionally had me invested in the show, and just the theatricality of it versus, obviously what Cadets were doing drill design wise was
Yes.
groundbreaking for 84, so
Well, see, that's
obviously it is what it is.
if you talk about those 3 years in particular, 86, 87, and 88, was all based on that kind of stuff. It was all based on emotion. It was all based on trying to get the crowd engaged. And I think we did that as good or better than anybody's done it in any show. And when we went away from that in 89, we paid the price. When we went and did more serious music, Carmina Burana and that kind of stuff, we paid the price not only with the audience, but the judging community. They didn't particularly care for us to change our style. And, unfortunately.
But the question I would ask is, did the Sky Ryders ever really have a style? I look at that. I look at the organization. I go back to the early 80s, the late 70s, early 80s. And to me, one of the things that I thought was cool about the Sky Ryders is that the Sky Ryders could come out and do anything in any year. They could come out with a completely different look, a completely different sound, and always somehow seem to pull it off.
Well, I'd say the early 80s, the year that we did, I can't think of one that Larry Kirshner wrote, Home on the Range, and some of those, Fire Dance, all that stuff. It was kind of more of a jazz-oriented production.
Yeah.
And then, in 85, was the first attempt at The Wizard of Oz. And we decided, I was not there for that summer, but I came for this, in the fall of 85. We pretty much had the same staff, Tommy Keenum and crew, and they made a decision. Okay, we did it once. We think we can do it better a second time, and then that's kind of where those 3 musicals came about. West Side Story, and then it went into or Wizard of Oz, and West Side Story, and then we kind of had a big changeover in staff, but we wanted to keep the same idea, and then we went into Sound of Music. And so I think for 3 years there, we had, we were the musical corps, I guess you want to call it. We did the music. Then they went back to it in 91 when they did Camelot.
I look at the Sky Ryders as a corps that kind of had eras, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So obviously that 85 through 88 would have been the musical era.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I actually called them the cowboy zoot suit corps. Because you had the big hats and the big flowy sleeves and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But there was definite eras to the corps.
Exactly. Yeah, I would agree with that.
So I'm going to kind of circle that back around to a question that we had kind of written up before this conversation to kind of keep us on track as we are prone to fall off the rails here. There's a video of you telling the story about 1987 and why you think this made finals and things like that. it apparently was a YouTube clip that I haven't watched, and I apologize for that. Can you kind of recap this story that you have where in about the 87 Sky Raiders?
Well, it was a difficult year from a logistics and transportation aspect. We that's back when Corps owned their own buses, okay, which I hope they never go back to try to do. And we would occasionally there were a couple of years there we didn't get out of the parking lot to get out of town without having some kind of problem. So in '87 was particularly the worst, and that's when after '87 we went to chartering. We quit doing the owned buses. We had owned our buses for quite a while, and they were older GMCs. And the biggest issue we had, or the first major issue we had, is we went to Denver for Drums Along the Rockies, and we had a parent who didn't like the way one of the buses was running, called the highway patrol, and they came out and inspected the buses, and they impounded them. And we had to fix. There were some airbag issues. Was the issue? So we were stuck in Denver for a week, or in Boulder, I guess I'd say it was in Boulder, and we got real lucky that they let us stay at this housing site and stuff, and it took a week to fix the buses because parts had to be flown in from other parts of the country or whatever, and so we had nothing. All we could do was practice, you know, and many of us feel that's because we were you know we were outside the top 12 then that part of the season looking in, and so we were able to make a bunch of changes. How many times do you get to sit back then that, you were doing shows every other day, it seemed like. And so, when did you have time to sit there and make major changes, in the middle of the season? So we did that. We left Denver or Boulder, drove to Bloomington. I think we lost a bus in between there too. And Bill Cook with Star gave us a bus and a driver, didn't charge us a dime back then. He didn't, that was Bill Cook. And we deadheaded straight to Allentown and got off the buses. We were late. They were able to, I think someone else was late too. Because I saw this the other day. Someone else was late. It could have been VK or someone. They had issues also. And we were able to perform, did extremely well. I mean, we got off a bus with no practice, no nothing, straight from Denver. And
Wow.
and did a great job in Allentown, and the season just kind of blossomed from there. And I think that week is what saved our season as far as competitive, because we were able to do things that we thought we needed done, but when were you going to have time to do it? And we were able to do it then. And Boulder was a great place. I mean, other than the curfews they always have for sound ordinances.
Right.
But but it was beautiful. The kids really liked it, and we could sit there and get stuff we wanted to get done, and it was wonderful. It was, for me, it was extremely stressful because we had to raise
Sure.
money. We had to raise money to get the buses fixed, And one
Yeah.
of the misconceptions is we took our buses in for maintenance always before the season started. So why that issue wasn't addressed then, I can't tell you. I'm not a mechanic, but it was a problem we ran into, and it's like, oh, didn't need it, but actually in the end, it probably was a blessing.
Those buses back then, I'll just follow up with that. I mean, I have a story going from Texas into the 93 finals in Jackson, in which we had been boating from, my bus had broken down.
Oh yeah.
The air conditioning was out. And so you don't do no air conditioning in Texas. And so we're just sitting on laps, going from one place to another, sleeping in floors, sleeping in luggage racks, sleeping on other people, going from one place to another. And I can't imagine that ever happening in modern drum corps now. Thankfully, we
Yes.
would just never allow that to happen. The things that we did back then just to get from point A to point B.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember we were in St. Louis one year. It could have been 87 or 86. One of the two. I can't remember exactly when. It was the show was at Busch Stadium, and
Was it the storm?
It was like 105 degrees. It was, shoes were melting on the field, and
Mhm.
but we were down to two buses. So and I don't remember how far away we were, but we were shuttling the Corps to the show on two buses. You take two buses over, you take them back to housing state, take them again, take them back over. It's like, oh my
Yep.
God, this is a nightmare.
I'm actually in St. Louis. That's my hometown.
Okay.
So St. Louis was always 87 was that infamous rainstorm, the lightning storm
Yeah, but
that everybody
the one
talks
year
about.
it was
It
so
was like 100 degrees.
yeah, it was so
Yeah.
hot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I recall back in the day some of the equipment as far as buses and trucks and so on and so forth. How the freelancers never ended up in the same situation as the Sky Riders, I have no idea. Because the buses that we had were, in fact, I think the bus that I ran on for the first 3 years, the starter never worked once. The only way to start the bus was to push it. But one of my favorite memories, though, was I think it was '89. So our convoy consisted of, I think it was 4 buses. We had 2 semis. So we had an equipment truck and the kitchen. And then we had this truck called the Brigadier. And the Brigadier was used for, it carried the scaffolding, everybody's sleeping bags, and all the dry food. And one year we were going into Ogden, Utah, I think it was. And do you know the scale house going into Utah out of Nevada? All the vehicles showed up except for the Brigadier. Turns out the Brigadier was about 8 miles back down the road because it had literally snapped in half.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And rather than fixing it like the way you would think they would fix it, we got the brig back about 2 weeks later, and it was just 9 feet shorter. So
Yeah, right.
That's
You
the
know,
way
I
we
have
did
to
things.
say,
yeah,
I have to say something about Bill Cook and the folks at Star. Star got a ration of grief in the 80s when they came out. And I mean, people loved to hate Star. But when drum corps needed help, they, because of their finances and because, who their patron was, they were always there to help. I mean, I think
Oh
they were
yeah.
one of the big helps for 86 for Blue Devils when Blue Devils had that truck fire.
Yeah.
I think
I mean,
they were always
you could
there
call
to kind of
Bill,
help.
or you could call Bob Ledman, who was, who worked for Bill and was, huge into
Mhm.
drum corps. You could just pick the phone up and call those guys and say, "Hey, what can you do to help me?" And they would bend over backwards to try to do something.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
but
Yeah.
if anything else, though, what they did was they set the blueprint for how to run a modern drum corps.
Oh
As
yes.
far as
Mhm.
running it like a business and not
Yeah.
running it from your kitchen table.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a perfect segue into a question that I wanted to add in. You were the executive director. I'm sorry if you were executive director or CEO or whatever the title was in the 80, you said 86, 87,
Yeah.
88 seasons.
Exactly.
Back then, a lot of the executive directors were also the drum corps director. It's all we did was drum corps. We didn't have
Yeah.
all these other
And
feeder
that's the case.
programs.
Same thing with myself. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're kind of doing everything. You're looking at the finance sheets, you're looking
Yeah.
at the scheduling, you're looking at events, you're looking at get the core down the road and the logistics. Nowadays, a drum corps has an executive director or CEO.
Yep.
Then we have a drum corps director, then we have a programs director, then we have the show coordinators and all that kind of stuff. How have you felt, and we'll go into what Sky Riders as a foundation is doing now, and you said you're also the president of the foundation. How have you seen that role change for what you're doing now, what you're focused on now as the CEO and the executive director
Well,
of the
one of the things
board?
that I've kept consistent a little bit is, way back when, I am not the visionary person when it comes to what goes on the field. That's not my area of, if I have any area of expertise, that's not one of them. Is that you have to hire quality people around you or bring people in, and then leave them alone, you know, and not get involved. For example, back then it was Tommy Keenum and Mary Cersei and a bunch of other people who were the show design, and I stayed out of it. It wasn't my area. It's like, that's why you're here. Take care of it. That kind of thing. And same thing with the musical part. Mark Whistles was our drum guy. Larry Kirshner helped write the book with John Simpson, and we had some really good brass people. Chris Knighton, who's now the director of bands at University of Arkansas, and stuff. And we just had good people, and you got to learn that you can't do everything. You got to do the areas that you can do, and then rely on the other people. And I've taken that same philosophy into what we're doing now with Sky Riders, because especially when you start off from scratch, basically, you don't have the funds to fill all those positions. You know, um, And it is amazing the drum course now with, and I understand it. I mean, you look at a staff sheet on a major corps nowadays. There's more people in one section than I had as a complete staff back then. But a lot of it now is that with all the commitments that these people have, teaching commitments, they have to hire that many people because these guys are coming in for a week here, they're leaving, they're coming back in. They're in and out all the time, and we're finding that a little bit now. What we've been lucky to do with the new startup is we have been able to go back to our alumni and bring them in, and many of them are doing it non-gratis. They're not, they just want to help, and so we've been able to set a budget that is not killing us because I've got people doing things that are saying, look, I just want to give back, you know. And we've hired a good staff. It's a young staff for the techs and stuff like that. And we're trying to get as many local people as possible. But we're also, one of the challenges we have right now is we're running it from a distance. I'm right outside Green Bay, Wisconsin. All right. We have a couple of people in Hutch, but not too many yet, So we're all doing it from, I can't tell you the number of Zoom calls I'm on, to help to get this ran. And so it's some of it is still the same from way back then, but man, has it changed. And but some of it still, I mean, it's you got to find the kids, you got to make it a great experience. That's all the same, that doesn't change. You got to hire quality individuals who know how to teach, but also know how to relate to the kids, that know how to put a product on the field. And right now you got to start small, and that's the one great thing about SoundSport, which I'm sure we'll get into, is there was no such thing back in the day as SoundSport, and this is a great way to start a drum corps, either revive a drum corps that used to be here, or start a brand new one that was never there, and because they don't want a corps or a group to come out and say we're here, we're on the field, and then a year or two later they're gone because they just didn't have their act together. So there's a lot of steps to get to where you want to go, and I think that's very smart of DCI to put this whole program into place.
Absolutely.
But I think you're seeing that with the number of corps that are going, or that are going through the steps. As far as you started a SoundSport group, you got to stay in that for a couple of years. You got to get evaluated to go into open class affiliate. You got to stay there for a year. Then once you get past there, you get accepted as an open class member, and then you can stay in open class for as long as you want. Until you feel like you're ready to go into world class, and then you got to get evaluated again and get accepted into world class. So, I think from that standpoint, that's been a great evolution of the activity. As long as we can, the major corps are always going to worry about the major corps. They're not too worried about what's going on the other end sometimes, which I hope will change. We have got some great support from people who have said, look, we're really encouraged by what you're doing, and hopefully you can get it done. So,
and I think we saw another value of SoundSport as well in the announcement this week from the New York Skyliners. New York Skyliners have announced that they're moving to SoundSport away from DCI All Age, whereas in the past that might have just been we're folding,
Yeah.
So it's nice that there's this area, if you will, that you could put organizations together that either you can compete, you can choose not to compete, but you can grow or you can consolidate your organization, as opposed to either you're here or you're not.
Yeah.
So
you can grow at your own pace.
Yeah.
Right.
It also helps, kind of like to one of your points is getting your stuff together, right? Because core, any type of group is an expensive adventure, but it's also a logistical nightmare. So it takes you time to kind of get your wheels rolling, you know what I mean? And then you while you're building your organization, your staff, your base, your fundraising and stuff like that. And when we were talking to Dave, like the whole SoundSport community, when I first heard it come out, I was like, whatever, it's just, whatever it is. But then after I think after the pandemic, it really kind of shifted into a really valuable tool for everybody because of the financial piece that was starting to kind of hit everyone after the pandemic. You know, it gave, like this year's, we have five groups going into from SoundSport into Open Class affiliate. And I think it's amazing. I mean, considering, like you said, it's just kind of like a launching pad for
Well,
groups.
you have three. You have three going into open class affiliate, and you have a couple going into all age.
Yeah,
You got you got Zephyrus and Memphis going into open class, and then you've got, I don't remember the one in Michigan and a couple others that are going into the all age. And I think I think this marriage of all age and DCI or DCA into DCI is, I think we're going to find, is going to be very beneficial. I think you saw, from what I understand, and I was around those guys a lot last year because of the fact I running the shows and stuff, and I went out to Rochester and was the contest director for that show, and then a lot of stuff I did with DCI at championships is that their enthusiasm and their memberships grew because of the restructuring of how it worked. You know, they didn't have to go into September. You know, normally their finals would be, you know, Labor Day weekend. And so it cut their season shorter. So, you know, it was easier to recruit people. And if you look at if you actually got in front of a lot of those groups, and you looked at them, it's a mix. There's a lot of junior age members in those groups.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just age out people. And that's, you know, now one of the things we're doing, we are trying to keep it as a junior drum corps. We're not, you know, we're not looking to go into 30-year-olds traveling with 15-year-olds, you know, but some have decided that, and if that's the best way to do it, that's, you know, it's another avenue, you know, but you can grow the organization how you want to grow it at the pace you want to grow it at. And you can either choose to compete in SoundSport, which is more of a ranking, not a numbers thing, or you can choose not to. You don't have to, you know. And if I remember right, you can be anywhere from 5 members to 165 members, you know. So
right.
So I
30-year-old is young. I was marching when I was 50.
Yeah.
So.
The day I put my horn down, I never needed to go back to the march.
I marched with Kids Grove Scouts over here from 2016 to 2019.
Yeah. So,
I'm on the steering committee.
And hopefully what we're doing, you'll see a bleed over into DCI Europe and all that stuff, or whatever, you know, whatever they call it over there, to help build some of those programs back in the future too.
Yeah, we discussed this with Dave, and it was something I said. I think it's a great idea, SoundSport in the UK and Europe. I think it's probably about 5 years too late, but I'd say better late than never. But yeah. So sorry, Jen, you were going to say something.
You know, Kanan is a resident glass half empty until proven wrong guy. I, for one, am very excited about SoundSport's involvement in the UK, right? Yeah. I think that it's going to be a great incubator for programs to either come back or establish. And that is going to bring us to our next section, which is talking about reviving an old drum corps. So I would love to hear how this idea came to fruition, how the energy came back to bring our beloved Sky Ryders back as an organization, just from being an alumni foundation to actually being an active ensemble.
It started.
Just walk us through that.
Yeah, it started in. I was thinking about this morning to get my dates right, because the older you get, your memory, even short-term memory, kind of like goes out the window. In the spring of 22. I got contacted by a gentleman named Jay Smith, who is a alumni of Sky Ryders. He resides in Bozeman, Montana, and he's a founder and director of a theological grad school. And his work, he traveled a lot, recruiting kids to come to his graduate school, and he would be in the Kansas Hutchinson area. And he had the idea to try to revive it with doing some work with the junior college down there. It was a really nice junior college in Hutchinson. And so he got a hold of me and got a hold of Steve Vickers, who's an alumni of Sky Ryders, who's, owns and runs Drum Corps World. And then some other people. And we sat down in the spring of 22 and started saying, okay, can we do something like this? And so I looked at the DCI schedule that year, and I saw Blue Devils were in Colorado and they would have to go to Broken Arrow. So I thought, well, let's see if we can get them to stop in Hutch. They need a housing site, all right, and we could promote a clinic for kids and have them, get them housing in the stadium to practice and that kind of stuff. And that's what we did. So I called Pat Seidling, and we worked it out. And they came in Hutch. They had been in Great Bend a couple years before that, but their stadium was not available. So I said, "Hey, would you come?" And they said, "Yeah, we need a place." So we had like 175 kids show up for a session, and about 700-800 people came and watched them just practice. And did a run through at the end of the night, but just did it in t-shirts and shorts. And we thought, well, hold it, this maybe has some legs to it. So after that, we got more people involved, and in the spring of 23, we did all the paperwork we needed to do as far as your 501c3, your articles of incorporation, all that stuff with the state of Kansas, the federal government. Formally had a board, all that kind of stuff. And we got a grant from Hutchinson Community Foundation to put on clinics that year, and we did like 10 clinics in the spring of 24, the winter and spring of 24. And then we thought, okay, this went well enough. Let's see if we can put a group together. And I went to DCI and I said, hey, look, can we get a show in Hutch last summer? And I was able to get one. And so we had 5 corps come in. It was one of those shows they did last year that it was a non-judge show. So we had Madison Blue Stars Troopers Battalion and Colt Cadets come in, and we were able to put 68 kids on the field for just a standstill. We did the national anthem, a couple other tunes, and put them in t-shirts and shorts, and that's how we started. Last summer was they came in for a day and a half practice and did a nice job. And so we met after that and as a board and said, okay, let's take the next step. Let's see if we can get this even farther. So we've been working all winter on putting a staff together, a show concept, which we'll probably, hopefully we'll announce in the next week or so, the show. And now it's the stressful for me. It's we've been raising money, which has actually gone fairly well. But it is a ridiculous amount of money it takes. We just bought some new front ensemble equipment. We own our own battery. The nice thing about SoundSport is I don't need to go out and spend $300,000 on a horn line, because you don't have to, because in SoundSport the kids can use whatever instrumentation we want to use. So and we did have wind players last year, because hey, saxophone players turn into baritone players. So we last summer with the 68 kids, we had kids from Kansas, we had kids from Missouri, we had kids from Oklahoma. So we decided, okay, let's see if we can get this to go farther. And this is, like I was saying, this is a stressful part right now for me, is our camp start. We have a camp at the end of the month. Is, can we get the kids? I'm not so much worried right now about the finances.
Yeah.
It's, can we get the kids to, because you're going into an area that has not had drum corps in 30 years. Okay. At one time when I marched, state of Kansas had 7 or 8 drum corps all at once. You had us, you had Oregon, who was a national power. You had Salinas Silver Sabres, which were a decent corps. You had a couple in Wichita at one time, Kansas City, Emporia. So you had 7, 8 drum corps in Kansas. Well, they haven't had any in 30 years. And now the closest drum corps to us right now is Zephyrus, which is started in SoundSport. They're out of Tulsa. Um, and then Colts and Phantom would be and the guys in Denver, So the question is, can we get the kids? And that's what we're working on. Can we get them to come in and uh, understand what we're trying to do? And so that's our biggest emphasis right now.
But on the same token, Hutchinson's still driving distance from, quite frankly, some pretty big high school marching band hotbeds in that area.
Yeah,
Broken Arrow, Oklahoma
yeah,
City.
yeah,
You know,
Kansas City, but back way back when in the 80s, one of the issues we ended up what that kind of hurt us at the end was that nobody was from Hutchinson or Kansas. We had a huge amount of kids from Texas, huge amount of kids from Mississippi, Arkansas, all that stuff, and we realized that we're not going to be able to do this with just kids from that central location where we're at. A lot of people have asked, why did you restart this in Kansas? Why didn't you go to a bigger metropolitan area? Well, because we wanted to bring it back to where it originally was. That was the goal. Can we bring it back and restart it where it started? And can we help the music educational programs in the state of Kansas, in northern Oklahoma or wherever improve? And there's some really good bands down there. But what can we do? Because we don't want to be seen as an organization that just takes. We want to be able to give back. And one of the things that we did when we did our clinics last year, we brought people in. We brought Darren Davis out of Broken Arrow in because he's an alumni. We brought him in. We brought some drum guys in from Texas and just different people, to do these clinics to say, hey, look, this is what we can offer. This spring in 1st of February, we are going with Olathe, Kansas. There's a bunch of high schools. Olathe is a suburb south of Kansas City. And we're bringing in Julie Davila and her husband Lalo to do a clinic. Just offering those type of things to give back to the music community in different areas. And we're hoping that will help generate interest, and that kind of stuff. So that's the route we're taking, and we're trying. The route was, to me, is SoundSport, at least for us, is we can offer this to a student who doesn't have to commit a whole summer, all right, doesn't have to commit $5,000 to $6,000 of tour fees, So what we're going to do is we're going to do our clinics or a camp. We're calling them camps and evaluation. One day, we got them set from, and we're bringing them this year to where the kids are. So we're doing a camp in Hutchinson. We're doing in Blackwell, Oklahoma. We're doing one in Hollister, Missouri, which is the Branson area. We're doing one in Kansas City. We're looking to try to get into Columbia, Missouri also if we can. So we're going to where the kids came to us from last summer. We're going back to them and saying, we'll take the camps to you. Okay. And we've been very successful in getting locations that aren't costing us an arm and a leg, and being able to get the staff to go there, and trying to outreach that type of thing. So now we'll just see if we can get it done, and that's the key: is can we get the kids to do this? And so what we're going to do is June. We'll have a move-in June 30th. We've talked with the junior college. We can put them up in dorms. And then we're going to do the show in Ankeny. We're going to do the show in Dubuque and the show in Lisle. So we're going to do 3 shows. Unfortunately, because of the way DCI changed the tour this year, their routing, I don't know if you've noticed, but the first major show is in Denver. And then they kind of go disperse out from Denver. Is that our show kind of got kicked to the curb for a year because it just wouldn't fit into the schedule. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, then Broken Arrow and Olathe are both on the same day. Well, I could have went to Broken Arrow 3 hours south. I could have went to Olathe 3 hours north, not spend a ton of money. That doesn't work. So now I have to go up into Iowa to do 3 shows, which is fine. And so what we're trying to tell kids is, hey, come get the experience. Okay. Come see what drum corps is about and not have to give up your whole summer and spend a ton of money doing it. And that's kind of the vision we have to start with. And I think it's the same kind of vision a lot of the SoundSport groups have is, come check it out, see what drum corps, get a taste of it, see if you like it, and grow with us if you want, or if you want to go to the next step, if you want to go to whoever, Genesis or the Colts or whoever. After that, hey, that's fine. If we can get you started in the activity, we'll get you started in the activity. So that's kind of our philosophy, how we're looking at it.
That's awesome. So doing 3 shows. There's no plans to do Indianapolis this year, then? No.
No, it's just too expensive. We can't. We can't. We don't have that kind of money to do it yet. And I don't know if it's so. The goal right now, if I was to lay it out on a timeline, is SoundSport this year, SoundSport next year, and then go into open class affiliate in 27, and then open class 28, 29. See how we're doing. See what the finances like. Because unfortunately it's all based on finances. You got to raise the money. And you got to be able to. You got to be able to sustain it. And that that's we're a long ways off from that part of it. We're doing okay, but it's not like we're floating in cash. So we have to be very, very strategic on how we spend our money and how we do it. And we're trying to be very conscious of that. And that's what's been great about the alumni. A lot of our alumni coming in and saying, "Hey, we're here to help."
It absolutely warms my heart though to hear you saying that, though, that we're living within our means. We're doing what we can do now. On a completely different side note, by the way, every time you mention Olathe, Kansas,
Yeah.
I don't know about Justin, but for me it brings back PTSD because that's where we stayed for Kansas City finals.
Okay.
And what I remembered was the high school we stayed at. I remember it was the largest flying insects I've ever seen in my life. I have no idea what they were. They were some sort of a mix between like a grasshopper and a cockroach.
Okay.
But they were about that big.
Yeah.
And then to this day, I can never forget the what do you call those places where they feedlot? Is it a feedlot? Is that it?
Yeah.
Where they fatten up cows?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Stockyard.
there was one next next door to the high school we were staying at. I could still smell it to this day.
I'm sure the Roman was probably wonderful.
Oh my
I still
Everybody-
think 92 in Wisconsin was worse.
Oh yeah, no, 92. We were stuck between a cheese factory and a brewery.
Yeah.
I don't remember this. I just remember being cold in 92.
The fertilizer truck. We used to have there was like we were down in this like ravine kind of a thing, and there was a levee that this like tractor thing would pull this like liquid fertilizer across like all day long, and the smell would just come down on the field. People were just like vomiting, like doubled over.
I have zero recollection of that.
Hornstaff shouting at us, "Breathe!" We're like, "No, we don't want to." I don't even care about making finals at this point. I just don't want to smell it anymore.
Oh my gosh. I
Exactly.
have no memory of this. No memory.
Sorry, Jen, we've gone
Maybe
off
I've
the rails.
repressed it. So yes.
Sorry, Jen, we've gone off the rails.
So a follow-up question to this season. Is it all just brass this year, or will
No,
you
we'll do
have a
both.
mix?
We'll
You'll have mixed
do a
instrumentation
mix.
still?
Yeah, we'll do a
Okay.
mix. Yeah.
Okay.
And the show the concept is there. They're finalizing that, and so we hope we bought a front ensemble, so hopefully add a front ensemble to the mix this summer, and see what we can pull off.
Hey, can I whisper a suggestion in your ear?
Sure.
Wicked.
Yeah. I don't have
Come
that.
on,
I don't have that. I don't have that
just
kind
makes-
of. I don't have that kind of music licensing money.
I was gonna say, do you have
We'll,
money for
we'll
that
raise it for you.
licensing?
It just makes sense. If we can raise it for you, will you do it? Because
Yeah.
there's no other core than the Sky Ryders that should do
Yeah.
that.
2027. 2027.
I think you're going to see us stay with a theme. All right, kind of that type of stuff. I think we realized that was our niche, and we're going to probably play to that niche for a while.
Yeah.
Maybe not
Cool.
to the extent we did back then, but we'll look at that to start with.
Yeah.
So can I suggest, and this may get cut out in editing, I don't know. Can I suggest that because I'm just conscious that we've had you on for nearly an hour now,
Okay.
is that we kind of wrap up the questions
Yeah.
and we go to the watching the 87 show and doing a wrap up from there?
Okay.
I think that's fantastic.
The first thing I notice is in when I was queuing up the video before, is the scaffolding there is really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
Oh.
wow, that's a jump.
Oh, that jump.
I don't think DCI would allow that anymore.
No, not anymore. Especially they lowered it this year, I think.
Yes.
Or WGI did actually.
So you have black, white, and gray. So is the gray the neutral?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but I just wanted to verify that.
Yeah.
Nice sound.
Always miss the days of the other performers in the back stands.
Yeah.
So I noticed the Sky Ryders rainbow in the back stands there. Do you know
Oh,
that
yeah.
it kind of got stolen in '89?
Yeah, we actually found one this last summer. One of our
wow.
directors had it with him in Arkansas.
I'm just suggesting that a particular xylophone player from a particular corps from
Yeah.
California may have taken off with it.
I had heard that.
We really were the worst.
It was the same year that one of our baritone players ate his Cheerios out of a Phantom Regiment helmet as well.
The worst.
You know,
Guys-
back then, one of the things about this guard, everything, all the flags, we made ourselves. You know, we didn't hire XYZ company to make anything. We did it all.
The very Midwest thing is Phantom Regiment was the same way. Our crew made all of our flags.
Yeah.
The dresses that the guard wore were just absolutely gorgeous, and they didn't
Yeah.
feel like color guard uniforms. They felt like
No.
dresses, you know.
Oh, the two valves. I missed the two valves.
Yeah, the G Buell had its definitely own distinct sound
Mhm.
compared to the B flag.
Ooh, nice impact there.
Love this rifle line. Stop.
Wow.
Yeah, the G Bugle, the G Bugle would make an average player great.
Well, the brightness of the sound, really.
Just made the average player loud.
This is off of, what ensembles off of before amplification.
Wow. Dang.
The fellas in that guard were so good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. One of the attentions to detail that I love about the color guard is the male members distinctly had different colored hair. You had blonde hair and you had dark hair to represent the different, gangs. And I just thought that was such a cool detail.
Oh,
A lot of sun in,
batons.
I assume, got used. Whew.
I'm just really impressed with the costuming of like all the different things happening. It's just
Always like this part.
Yeah. I want to know what happened to the judge. There he is. stuck in his costume.
But you're right. The guard was the strength of the show that year.
Yeah. Not to sell the horn line short or the drum lines. Oh, his backhand spring here is so good. Whee! Ah,
Oh, wow.
I love it. Perfect.
Whoever that parent was that dobbed you in for the buses, you should send him a thank you note.
I know, right?
The extra week of rehearsal did you the world of good.
I can't remember. Was that Kansas City or was that was Madison?
This Madison.
Yeah, I should have.
For me,
It's so-
Madison's a very special place because I first placed 19th there, and I aged out a finalist. So
Well, I think two of the best stadiums we've ever gone to were Madison and Kansas City,
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
as far as venue.
I understand the reasoning, but I miss outdoor finals.
I think for me, Madison holds that emotional place. But if I'm being brutally honest, I think the best venue we've ever been in was Kansas City.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And if you listen to the audios, not the audios were bad in Madison, but in Kansas, it just had a different sound to it. It was just different.
Nice sound on the low brass there.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of credit to be given to the horn line. My gosh.
But the drum major there is Brady Massey. He was our drum major in 86, 87, 88. He's the one writing our horn book for this year.
Wow.
He's a retired band director in Arkansas.
Very cool. You know, the challenges of the drill design with the uniforms. I think you were the first drum corps to do a split uniform like this, if I remember.
Yeah, I don't recall before that. I mean, there could have been, but I
Yeah. Yeah, and
So,
it's just
here's bits that we could add to the list of things you can't do in drum corps these days.
don't. Yeah.
who says? Phantom Regiment
Well,
says shenanigans.
Yeah, how many people died in Phantom shows? 100.
200 and something.
Mainly drum major.
This choreography.
Just the storytelling is just unreal.
But to go back to the drill design, I think cadets did it one year with 2 uniforms. But
Yeah, Angels and
that's
Demons.
kind of it. Yeah. So good.
I'd never really realized how athletic this guard book was as well.
Oh my gosh. Yes. This is why.
Which for the time, I mean, drum corps, we were still relatively pedestrian in 1987. You know, we weren't. The corps like this and 87 Garfield and stuff like that were the ones that really started ramping up the athleticism of the activity.
It took a lot of coordination between the staff to pull this off, to work together, to make sure every section did its part.
Just so many moving parts between the different color uniforms, where to feature the guard, where not to feature the guard.
And we had a very, like I said, you got to give Tommy Keenum and his crew a huge amount of credit from the aspect of putting the show together.
That's cool.
This
there,
is
right there.
gorgeous. This is gorgeous. Yeah.
So much emotion. And just the right amount of splashes of color with the guard as well.
And I think that's the first part of the show where you see that and integrated between black and white. And that's
Yeah.
Yeah,
really-
that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Wow. Just so
Is that
colorful.
the horn line singing?
No.
Yeah, it did sound like singing, huh?
Yeah, that was 12th place.
That was 12th place. Oh my goodness. It's so I'm sorry. I love that show.
Yeah. Wow.
Cadets may have been cleaner.
Well,
I don't care. Well, I said may.
Yeah.
I don't. And I'm not saying this to blow sunshine up your backside. That to me is the definitive West Side Story.
well, we took two different approaches to it, and
Yeah.
both of them were equally outstanding.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think the
I just-
storytelling mechanism of your show, you could actually watch the show and see the story happening. Where I think
Yeah.
Cadets kind of took a more broader stroke with the design,
Mhm.
and just like, this is the music of it, and here's some visual to go with it. Your guys' show was, here's the
Literal.
musical from beginning to end, and
Yeah.
you could follow
it was
along.
literal.
Yeah, and the emotion was unreal. I mean, I wish I could have been there live to see it, because you could tell the crowd was just like, oh my God, this is so
Yeah.
amazing. And then you can hear it in their voices. And I think it's just, and there was one point right near the end, I could have sworn I heard singing as well. So I don't know.
I don't
maybe
recall. I
audience
don't
was
recall there
singing.
being. I don't recall there
hear
being
that.
any singing by anybody that year. But the emotion part of it, because we heard through it all three of those years. We heard that people would come up to us and say, as Jen said, I was crying at the end of that show, and it was not just West Side Story, but it was also Wizard of Oz and also Sound of Music. We just had an act back then of doing that, and it's unfortunately, and this is my opinion, drum corps has too many times got away from that aspect of I think Phantom has done a great job in some of their shows of doing that with their Spartacus and the different shows they've done and stuff. But I think sometimes I think we just make it too complicated. It's just
Yeah.
doesn't need to be that complicated.
I
And-
talk about the
Homogenous is the word that I use. I often say, I look back at those days and I could close my eyes, for instance, I could tell you who I was hearing.
Yeah.
Because corps had their own unique sounds, or they had their own unique looks, or they had their own unique styles. Looking back at 87 Sky Ryders, I think that anything other than West Side Story and anything other than the interpretation that you guys took with that color guard, anything other than that would have been criminally negligent. To have those kids able to perform like that and not give them the opportunity to do that would have just been negligent. And I'm so glad that you did. And yes, Justin, you trust me, you are sorry that you missed that, because that was the one positive of coming in 19th place that year, is that I was in the stadium for it, and like many people, I managed to sneak around to the front sidelines for finals. So
I was in the stands as a spectator because my brother was aging out that year, so we were up in Madison.
But how many other shows do
Yeah.
you remember from 1987? I mean,
Well, and that's something I was gonna. That's a perfect
quite a
question,
few,
you know.
actually.
I don't. I remember Madison and Sky Ryders.
I remember Vanguard. I remember
Vanguard,
Garfield
yeah.
because for me
don't.
Garfield it's my absolute favorite Garfield Cadets show. Jen and I will forever disagree on this subject.
I'm coming from a color guard perspective, though. So
I remember the horrible. I also remember the horrible pink elephants in the Star of Indiana show, and I don't know if you're aware of this, Dale, but the absolute worst wipeout I've ever seen from a brass player was watching a Star of Indiana mellophone player get her teeth knocked in by those elephants
yeah.
My pink
at
elephant.
Allentown.
Oh,
No,
no.
literally got her teeth knocked in.
You know, I'm not going to dog on Star because I did enough of that back in the 80s. But what you know, they did what they did now is what any drum corps does now, or what they did then. All the props, all the stuff, all the storytelling. And in fact, if you look at it, those pink elephants were no different than half the props Sky Ryders had in '86 with Wizard of Oz. Half the stuff VK rolled out in the field. Like I said, people just love to hate on Star because they came with a bankroll.
Yeah.
And they were, you know, they were able to hire some extremely talented people to, you know.
Yes.
But hey, their brass staff. You know, Larry Kirshner wrote a lot of their music back then. He wrote our music.
Mm-hmm.
John Simpson was our head horn instructor in parts of the '80s. He was also with Star. So he had some crossover there, and
There was this
you
there was a
know,
lot of talk about they hadn't paid their dues. And I love this idea of dues because, like, okay, so we didn't push our buses down the street in 1979. You know, it's like, come on.
but how do I say this? There are times when you watch a complete season and you say, how does that corps still in ninth place? You know, they get pigeonholed, and it's like, really?
Mhm.
That was a much
Yeah.
better show than ninth place.
Oh yeah, no,
But-
and it happens to this day.
Yeah. I mean, there are corps that
Yeah.
once they start to move up, you know, they can get up there, but you'd have, you know, that's, I'll go back to Madison right now. Madison remaking finals, I think is huge because
Mhm.
they were becoming irrelevant in the competitive aspect of it because they had been down for a while, and they were able to really come out last year and put on a great show and get back in the final, which I think helps everybody. You know,
Yeah.
same thing with the Colts. There was years to Colts. You know, they made finals and they were out of finals for quite a while, and now they're back in there.
Troopers.
Now they're solidly in there. Same thing
Yeah.
with Blue Stars. You know, Blue Stars. You know, my father-in-law was a founder of Blue Stars, one of the founders of
Oh,
Blue
wow.
Stars, and you know, my wife was an instructor when they went back down to a cadet level corps, and then have worked their way all the way back. And you know, well, they're one of the strongest corps out there from an organizational standpoint.
Yes.
Is, you know, and Phantoms had the same issues, you know, way back when, and then have, you know, now are strong,
Recently.
you know, strong,
Yeah,
strong.
I
Yeah,
think-
we were knocking on the door of 13th in 2019. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, so
yeah. I think that what tends to happen as well is that we've all heard the concept of rate and rank.
Yeah.
You know, as far as, you know, slotting is another term for it as well. I don't know if so much as slotting is such a thing, but rating and ranking definitely, numbers management definitely happens. And I've worn a green shirt as well, so I know what it's like.
you know, I will say the one year, this is in our favor, the one year that it didn't happen was '88 when we were outside of finals. We were getting beat by Crossman, we were getting beat by Dutch Boy, we were getting beat by Freelancers, and we jumped all three of those corps in Kansas City that year.
I know.
We didn't anticipate, you know, we didn't. But what happened, in my opinion, is we came out with a very emotional show. Maybe it was because it was in our backyard that year, because it was in Kansas City. But we came out and did the best performance that corps had ever done that year and jumped those cores in the finals. And it was like, okay, maybe this can happen occasionally. That a core can jump.
All right, it's the second time you mentioned that.
Yeah.
I love the idea, and this is a conspiratorial argument that's been around in the forums forever, is that by having everybody chase these regionals all over the country, that we're basically ranking and rating, going and seeding into finals. And I love the tour schedule this year. We're going to dip into event management a little bit. Sorry, I do love the tour schedule this year because it does kind of break that apart.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to Atlanta. Not everybody. I think San Antonio is the only time we see everybody together until finals.
Yeah.
And so I do like the idea that it's going to leave a little bit of breathing room in that for people to make changes and jumps that we won't necessarily be able to predict.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely. Because go on, Dale. Sorry.
Well, a lot of that's based. The cores have come out and said, this financially is not sustainable. We have to come up with a better touring model. And we're starting a week later. Right? We're pretty much starting July 1st for the most part. And I think there's about 7-8 less shows this year than there was last year. So a lot of it is, you've got to make this, attainable for kids to be able to perform. And if you keep charging, if you're getting up to the amount of money they're charging with some of this stuff, it's getting difficult, And
I honestly think that the extra, and we were kind of talking about this earlier, when we competed back in the 80s, we had 42 shows, 43 shows we started in June, very beginning of June. We ended in August. So that was like 2 solid months of actual touring and performing and stuff like that. We were lucky. We had 15 shows under our belt before we got to Ogden. Yeah. I mean, we were lucky to find 2 days to rehearse.
But a lot of that was in your own backyard,
Yeah.
We could go to the Chicagoland area and stay there for a week and kind of home base out of one school and just go around, the different shows in Wisconsin, Illinois, whatever. And back when I marched, it was, more weekend type stuff, but you do a show in Great Bend, and then maybe on Friday, you do a show in Salina on Saturday, then the next, so you didn't have to travel and spend the kind of money they're spending now. I mean, on bus leases and truck leases and, everything else.
Well, that was what was interesting about the bridge tour in 2021 was it kind of revisited that backyard mentality of tour because everybody had their home base and then spoked out to different shows on the weekends. Yeah.
Well, and you see it. You're on Phantom. You said you're working on Phantoms. You said you're on their board.
I'm on the board. Yeah.
The amount of money that you're spending in certain areas is like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Spending $400,000 on a cook truck.
400, double that.
So it's just it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and not only that, but I mean, just look at the logistics of transportation. I mean, when people get on the interwebs and yap about electronics and props, I'm like, you are barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah.
That is not the problem.
Yeah.
So
even though it's not cheap.
Yeah, even though it's not cheap, it's not the biggest piece of the pie by any means. So it's it'll be really interesting to see how this builds from there. I'll be interested to look at. I said this to Dave also. I'll be interested to look at our expense sheet at the end of the year and see how it compares to previous tours.
Yeah.
So Dale, as far as kind of in the effort of kind of trying to wrap things up a little bit, so you got some camps coming up. Where can people find information?
Go on our website. Sky Ryders, PAF.org. And everything's up there. Our camp schedules, registrations, for camps, all that kind of stuff is up there. We haven't yet put up our tour, our 3-show tour yet. We're waiting to finalize a couple things. We kind of want to put everything out there at once, and we should do that hopefully in the next week to 10 days as far as release of what we're doing for a show and that kind of stuff. But yeah, the camps. The first one is January 25th in Hutchinson. Go online and sign up. It's a 1 day. It's a Saturday, and we've got 2 in February, 2 in March, 1 in April, and 1 in May, and 1 weekend. We're doing a full weekend in May. So,
and if people want to help out, can they just get a hold of you directly, or
they can get a hold of me? They can all my information's on the website. They can there's a donate button if anybody wants to donate on the website. All kinds of stuff. Yeah, we're open to anybody's help and stuff. So, but yeah, it's like I said, the key now is okay. We gotta get the kids.
All right. Well, thanks, Dale, for coming on the podcast today. You can tell we're all real fans of the Sky Ryders. I can't tell you how happy it makes, because we've been doing this podcast a while, but we were talking about a while back, just like, like corps, like every time we'd lose a corps, like we lost cadets and then we lost Southwind, or we lost Southwind then cadets, but we keep losing these iconic corps, and it's so good to have an iconic corps come back and kind of just be part of that fabric of DCI. Because when we were younger, Sky Ryders was there, and then they weren't, and then we weren't, the freelancers weren't there. So it's kind of great to have that organization rise up, and you guys taking the helm and directing the corps back to competition. It's just really exciting for us. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, I appreciate you guys reaching out to me. It's like I said, it's the goal. It's we're working hard at it, and we're putting a lot of time and a lot of effort, and now it's crunch time to get it done.
Yeah.
Well, moving forward, don't be a stranger. If you've got stuff that you'd like to show, that by all means, please get in touch.
Sure, be glad to.
And we'd love to talk to you after the season's over, just to kind of get your thoughts on what was great, and what you guys are building towards. So thank you so much.
Sounds good. All right,
Dale. Thanks again. Have a great camp coming up here.
Okay.
There's one other thing though.
Okay.
No matter who you're doing it with, no matter where you're doing it, no matter when you're doing it, no matter how you're doing it, just when you're doing it, make sure that you march on.
March on, everyone.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dale.
All right. Talk to you later.